Morning, friends and neighbors, brothers and sisters, everyone out there in listening land. Welcome to another edition of the Live from the Heartland show at home. This is number 20 for the week of September 6th. And we're going to have a lot of interesting conversation. I'm here with Katy Hogan and Thom Clark, and a little bit later we're going to bring in our guest, the Director of Equality and Inclusion for Cook County, Deniseretto. And it's going to be a good show, so stay tuned. Usually what we do is we start off talking, and not only usually, but today we're going to start off talking about some things we saw that were good things, were happy things, things that we liked. And I'll go first. Mine is a little bit of dialectical. You know, it's like, it's good, but it's also a little sad. And in my travels around town, I observed people, and I saw kind of a down and out looking guy the other day on a bicycle with lots of cards in the wheels making noise, and he was clearly having a good time. And then when I was driving down Chicago Avenue from Evanston, I saw a homeless guy in the corner of a building with a long coat and all of his equipment, gear, baggage. And, you know, it sort of hurt me, but he also had on a pink chiffon cape-like thing all around him. And it just made me kind of smile and be happy. So we got some hard times out there, but we got people trying to make the most of it. How about you, Thom?
Well, you know, I enjoyed several trips to the lakefront, which is technically still closed, but if you go at the right time of day, you can get a very nice visit into the park alongside the lakefront. I know some people before the lifeguards arrive can get a few dips in, either before or late in the day. It's just really nice to be by this wonderful resource. It's one of our best resources in Rogers Park besides the people. And that's where you can still see people. And, you know, by and large, we're doing the mask and the social distancing pretty well down the lakefront and around our neighborhood parks. It's our big salvation right now as we continue dealing with what we're dealing with. Katy, what about you? You got big plans.
My positive thing is that I got to talk with a couple friends this week that we are planning a trip, a get out of Dodge to go up to the relatively COVID-free Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Driving up there with a good friend to go up and see two good friends, and I'm very thrilled about that. Yeah. So
we got this election cycle right around the corner, coming up quick. What do you think? What do you think our chances are of pulling off a clean, fair election, Katy?
Well, I loved reading this week about the just past Massachusetts primary, where, by the way, a Kennedy lost. But the big news about it, yeah, we love Edward Markey. He's good. The big news about it is that they had the results on election night. The extra boxes that they put out next to United States Postal Service boxes, our familiar blue mailbox, was a place to deposit your ballot safely, your write-in ballot, so that scores and scores, hundreds of thousands of ballots didn't, slow down the U.S. Postal Service. And the results were, we got results on the very same night. Now, our show with Jan Schakowsky, she actually encouraged people to vote on election day. Did you hear that last week?
Yeah,
that's also because they want the results on election day. And nationwide, I don't suspect everybody will be as together as Massachusetts was, but it's a great sign that says if you've got a state or a city or a county that's paying attention to the process and protecting it, we can have a fair election.
You know, for all the knocks he's been doing against Chicago, Trump showed that he's really a Chicagoan this week.
I know. because he encouraged people to vote twice. Vote early and often.
At least twice.
I didn't know you could still do that in Chicago.
Yeah, you can't. You never could, really, but I'm so sorry about that.
At least it wasn't mine this time.
No, he repeated that in 2 states. He said, hey, vote on paper and vote in person. Let's see how it works.
And he hasn't given it up. I mean, he's doing his best to try to undermine the legitimacy of the election, and we have to do everything we can to tell him he's all wet by having the greatest turnout we've seen in decades.
Amen, my brother.
And, you know, whatever way you get your ballot in, you want to make sure it's in before Election Day, or you're voting in person on Election Day. Whatever it takes, we want to overwhelm the polling places with mail and people voting.
Just quickly before we bring our guest up, I want to let people know the good news that speaking up works. In Chicago, ICE postponed the Chicago Citizens Academy, which we reported on a few months ago. And local immigrant groups are like, whoo, thank you. Because since they announced the plans for a Citizens Academy, basically talking about how to catch immigrants in a net, immigrants and politicians both have slammed the academy as a xenophobic PR stunt that would give rise to, vigilantism. So,
alongside the election coming up, there probably will be a veto session of the legislature this fall. We need to watch what Exelon and ComEd may have up their sleeves this time. They once again are looking for a bailout of their nuclear plants, and they're again putting up the job flag. If we have to close these plants, we'll lose all these high-paying jobs. We need to look at this. We've bailed them out in 2014, in 2017, and now they're looking for another bailout in their rate structure. With all the stuff going on with the alleged bribery scheme involving the speaker and other things, this is one we need to watch carefully. Great editorial this recently by David Kraft, and we'll have him on soon to talk more about this. We are so pleased to have Deniseretto with us today. She is Director of Equity and Inclusion for Cook County, which is the second largest county in the U.S. She's also with the Parks and Recreation Board for the Evanston, and she now lives there after growing up in the south suburbs, and that's when she first kind of got involved with politics. She's been doing a lot of conversations and training around equity, inclusion, and diversity in philanthropy, companies, and for the next few minutes on Heartland at Home. Thank you for joining us this morning, Denise. We have statues tumbling and marchers protesting and armed militia alongside militarized police. It's said that these narratives that we're toying with and organizing around right now were built on narratives that cause harm. And I'm wondering if this is how you see things, and why are they hurtful, and how do we shift these conversations with all these other tensions going on in society right now?
Well, from my standpoint, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be here. And the description of what I do, you only got like half of the roles, right? I also own a production company where I launched at Sundance Film Festival at the beginning of 2019. We have a show on PBS right now that's all about changing narratives. And then I also have my consulting company still doing that work that you talked about in philanthropy, government, and business. And literally, I get up every day to make this country live up to the promise, which is a really faulty promise, but the promise that they made to all of its citizens hasn't been extended completely, still, all these years later. And so that's what I get up to do. And we all live in surround sound. I mean, it'd be different if we were all policy wonks only, or it'd be different if we only dealt with entertainment. All these narratives are intertwined, and there's at every intersection of our lives. And I'm one person, but I've decided I got to be in all of them, because I can't trust Hollywood to do what they're doing without some oversight. I can't trust government, and I can't trust, business or philanthropy. So that's why I feel like an octopus, and I have kind of tentacles in every one of those places. And I think with good reason, because there needs to be a shift in the way that we talk about ourselves, in the way that we talk about our dealings. And COVID-19, I think, blew it open for us. I hate that we have this. I hate this pandemic, but you know what? I'm actually super grateful. I have worked practically every day since the pandemic started, and I'm not tired. I'm not tired because for the first time in my adult life, everybody's on the same page with me, saying that we have got to be different. This country has to change. And so Right now I'm running on pure adrenaline because I never sleep.
You are clearly a multitasker to the nth degree. A little bit of a glutton for stuff there, Denise.
It is.
I can say that from one to another. I'm now retired, but I'm also staying busy every day, and I really agree with you about the upside of the pandemic, and we've been actually covering it by asking, do we really want to return to normal when it's done?
Well, we're making new normals. That's
Exactly.
what we're doing. We're not going back because what we had didn't work.
So let me ask you, what are some of the challenges to bringing equity and inclusion to Cook County operations specifically? We've covered it with a lot of people very close. We did have who's the sheriff? Dan.
Oh, Thom Dart.
Thom Dart. We have had Thom Dart on the show. We've had Cook County Hospital operators on the show. We have run the largest jail in the country, largest public health system. We have the great Forest Preserve holdings.
Yes.
So at a time when all of this is going on, what are the challenges that you face, and where do you start?
Sure. Well, the challenges are that, this is a 189-year-old institution doing what it was designed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the challenge, right? Like literally helping people rethink what our responsibilities are and rethink who we are accountable to and whose money it is and how. I don't know if you've noticed, but we did just distribute a lot of our COVID funds through an equitable lens. And that was such a great process. We partnered with CMAP to do that. And we looked at different factors, including in median income. We're looking at areas. And so when you see that list, you get to see that we distributed that money and it lines up exactly with places that we haven't been investing in, that have been actually divested in. And so that's, the challenge is really just helping everyone in every role at Cook County own equity. Just got to tell you that when I've been there 73 days. And what I say to people at the start of every meeting is do not think for a second because they have a person dedicated to equity that you don't own it. Every person in every role owns the job of looking at how they can be more equitable in the way that they're doing their work and how we can take care of the broadest range of our citizens, to include all the race, class, abilities. I mean, when you start talking about all the intersections of ways to marginalize people, it's vast. And so my job has really been to bring, quite frankly, awareness. And just so you know, I was negotiating with them before COVID, and I was really worried. I was, because how am I going to be an employee again after 11 years of being on my own? That was the first thing. Secondly, I was like, how am I going to walk into a 189-year-old institution and tell them all they're doing their jobs terribly? How am I going to do that? But you know what? I was ready. But then COVID served me up the platter. And so a lot of the things I was thinking I might say, or all the challenges I was thinking I might face, I'm not facing them because I just want someone to twist their lips and say to me that we don't have an equity issue when we can look at the data and see that we're all experiencing this trauma together, but some of us because of our zip codes, some of us because of our ability, some of us because of our skin, it's wiping us out. So it sounds terrible to say, but COVID made it very easy. Like I don't face a lot of opposition much.
Yeah.
Denise, please explain or share with our listeners why our listeners and our viewers, our audience, why policy work is not enough, and how does this work intersect with government, philanthropy, business?
Yes. Okay. So one of the main reasons why policy isn't enough is because policymakers are humans. Period. Policymakers are influenced by culture. Policymakers are on boards at philanthropy, right? So if you think that you only have to do the work in one space, that's so erroneous. It goes back to what I said at the start. We live in surround sound. And so, you're asking, that's why I went to Hollywood, to be perfectly honest, because my thought was, Hollywood has helped us, right? Because of Hollywood and Lucy and Ricky, we all believe that mixed marriages are okay, right? Because starting in the 50s, we had Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. That was, we were, yeah. And so by now, nobody, Helen and Tom from the Jeffersons, like you go through the years and now a mixed race couple is no big deal. Well, guess what? We know, and the other thing that we've seen in culture, smoking isn't cool anymore. I don't care. Like if you start back in when we first got TV through the 70s to now, you don't see characters smoking very often, right? So we know how to change culture. It's just that there hasn't been the will to. So that's why I went to Hollywood, and my company, it's all about where new narratives begin and the end of the system, begins, right? We start with these new narratives and starting to tell truer stories. My favorite movie that I can think of in recent years is Hidden Figures. And every time I start talking about it, I get mad. Yeah. Because why did I have to see that movie as an adult? And you know what else? My biggest favorite part of it, I want to say this, it wasn't about their brilliance. It was seeing Katherine Johnson as a widowed single Black mom find love again with a super hot guy. That's what, well, and I'm telling you, because as a Black woman who's a Gen Xer who went through a divorce recently, thought my whole life was over, to see that back in the 50s, right? Smart, beautiful, amazing Black women got men again. That's not what the narratives tell us. The narratives tell us that Black women and single Black women are the very scourge of our society, right? And so the narratives and it being across spectrum is so important, because in every single aspect we can influence the way people think, not only about themselves, but about their fellow people around them.
I think your bashing and changing set narratives is such challenging work because most of the time we don't even know what narratives we're playing around with in our head. The morning paper had a story about a blighted area of Winnetka, and all I could think of, oh my gosh, those people are going to come down on the train to Rogers Park. What are we going to do? But to put a practical edge on what you're trying to do here, Denise, you live in Evanston now. It's a lakefront community that is suffering severe erosion like other lakefront communities. How do you bring an equity lens, whether it's part of the park district or county government, to fixing recently refurbished Southside beaches or North Shore dwindling bluffs and ravines? Where do we decide where the dollars go, of which there's not enough to fix the lakefront? That's taking over land, taking over valuable stuff. Where do you start working the equity lens on that kind of an issue?
And that would be an easier question to answer if there was a lot of collaboration amongst the folks on the lakefront, right? You have all of us getting the same information from the Army Corps of Engineers and getting the same information from the Great Lakes folks, but yet there's like a North Shore contingent of folks working together, and working together is really loose because some folks further north than us, kind of have their own agendas and they're pushing. But part of the problem is, different entities, these different entities see equity differently, and so the answer to your question is we should be looking at the data of the residents around the areas. That would be, if I were in charge and if I had a magic wand to go across, density wise and people wise, we should be fixing those beaches on the South Shore, period. Right? There's more people. When you look at the average income, when you look at like all the different like factors, it's a no-brainer, right? But that's not the way it works. And we all know that, kind of the squeaky wheel gets the money, and most often Black folks, we can't afford to be squeaky wheels, right? In a lot of cases we have, well, look at me. I mean, yes, I'm privileged or whatever, but how often are you going to see me at a city meeting or something? Because I'm busy saving the whole world. I'm not advocating necessarily for different things locally. So it's a very difficult proposition, but what I am doing is building like a bench, right? There's a ton of millennials and Gen Zers, more than there are Gen Xers, right? Because boomers are there and still in power, and we got to build benches whether or not they're going to leave, so that when they die we can just slip in there.
Hey, hey, as a boomer, I'm a little afraid of that.
Well,
Everything-
notice I just said we were just going to wait till you die, because like the whole fighting it isn't going to happen anymore. So it's just like we have to build our bench and be ready to slide into the spots.
Well, interestingly enough, what I was going to ask you about, which after you just said what you said, I want to ask you so many other things about working with Deb Shore, for example, and the Water Reclamation District, and some of the other issues we've covered about Great Lakes, which we feel that we should be, ready to protect with our lives if need be, given that it's 20% of the world's fresh water supply.
Exactly.
But we won't go there, because I want to ask you, which also goes in with what you just said, how do you feel about the move for what our friend Salim Muakil, when he comes on the show, talks about reparations? And how do we do reparations? Because clearly, in this time, whether we call it that or not, that is what is called for. Some form of it. So how do you view that, please?
Well, first of all, we are such an ignorant society. I'll just say that. Like, Americans don't read it as a rule. And so like we shouldn't have to educate to the degree that we're having to educate about reparations. There's so much precedent, right? Germany, right. South Africa, like you know what I mean? Anybody who's read knows that what we're talking about is not uncommon. It's not, but my view is I won't see anything like that in my lifetime. I do think the Millies and the Zs, that's what I call the younger generations, I feel very strongly that they're going to have the political will. There's not enough folks in your generation or my generation that have the political will, and we have all the power, we have all the influence right now. So I believe they will happen in some shape or form. I just don't think I'm going to see them. I think, that the next generation is already, like, just the fact that we're talking about defunding the police. Right. Just so you know, I've been talking about abolishing the police since I became an adult. So to be able to have that be a mainstream conversation, just 23, 26 years later, that makes me know that reparations will come too. It's just in what form, in what way, who knows? But I do believe it's warranted. It's not only warranted, the defund the police is the beginning of that. Because if you think about it, it's one of the things we're going to be talking about during our Racial Equity Week that's coming up. We're going to be doing a film screening and panel discussion about Cooked by Survival by Zip Code, and that's a documentary about the summer of 1995. Yeah. Well, we're pulling some people together to talk about what would it look like if we didn't just keep buying more ambulances for us, and we reinvested that in some of the communities that are doing, in some of the community organizations and people on the ground doing the response in these neighborhoods. And so we'll get there. It's gonna take a lot.
Denise, let's go back to Hollywood. What do you mean about I'm coming for Hollywood? You got a new TV show in the works, and I just got to throw in there, if you need an old white guy with a SAG card, I'm available.
Awesome. So good to hear that. So what I mean by I'm coming for Hollywood.
I knew you'd do that.
No, I love it. What I mean I'm coming for Hollywood is, I think Hollywood breaks its arm to give itself credit for helping drive culture, but they're not doing enough, and they're not doing enough fast enough. And with the vast amount of power and influence that Hollywood has, I mean, Hollywood is responsible for the cop problem we have, propaganda, Hill Street Blues, NYPD, Law and Order. Like, we could go on and on and on about how we have conditioned us to believe what we believe about police. And part of what we're going to do is, how do we undo that? Right. And so one of our show concepts is about talking the psychologists and psychiatrists and counselors that are embedded in police departments that don't get used. We have this fictional world of what would happen if they did get treatment for their trauma and then they police differently. Now, of course, I just told you I'm an abolitionist. So you might be saying, why would you be doing a show? Well, we're not going to go from law and order to nothing. We're not going to go. So part of how we will help along the defund the police is to treat them for their trauma and show how necessary it is for them to have trauma-informed responses to people that they're responding to. And if we start to show that in fiction, guess what? Fiction, art repeats life and life repeats art, whatever that saying is. So that's why I'm coming for Hollywood. The other thing is we, you know, how ableist we all are. I don't know what the stat is, but I was at a conference 3 years ago that said by the time we're all mature, 20% of us will have a disability of some kind, right? 20%. You know, that's basically, you know, 1 in 4 of us right here is going to have a disability or already does. And we aren't prepared for that. We don't talk about that. Plus all the neurodiversity that we've always had but didn't have language about. We have to start having better images of that. And The Good Doctor is great, but it's not super great because it's an able-bodied actor playing someone with a disability. So I'm going to Hollywood to change that. You know, we are working with a young lady right now who has cerebral palsy, and we're trying to do a sitcom about her wanting to be a stand-up comic, really looking at the challenges she's faced that some places she can't even fucking get on the stage, you know? So anyway, like I mean, obviously I care about Black people and the liberation of Black people is my first thing, but everybody else, if you do stuff through a racial equity lens, guess what? You catch everybody anyway. You catch everybody that might be left behind. So my Hollywood stuff, I wish I could clone myself because I only get to spend a fraction of my brain on that right now. And oh my God, I just can't wait for 2 or 3 shows to pop because then all the policy and other stuff, I'm gone. I'm going Hollywood.
Wow. Denise, you are a dynamo. If you did clone yourself, my gosh. Could you please let our listeners and viewers know what the title of your TV show is?
Sure.
And where do they find it?
Yes, it's on PBS right now. It's called Fly Brother. Who's so brilliant to launch a global travel show with a Black, gay, beautiful man leading it? I mean, come on. Even if it sucked, y'all would still like it because it's a global pandemic and you can't go anywhere. So it's called Fly Brother. You can find it at flybrother.net. It is on WTTW every Sunday at noon. So
the other thing, Denise, is people should know that they can go virtually to the Equity Week event.
Yes. Go to cookcounty.gov. Cookcounty.gov events, and we actually have a racial equity week. We actually just launched the website yesterday. So cool. Yes, there are a series of events on transportation, the Fold It Map project they have a feature, a little short film we're featuring.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Darnell, the environmental racial equity town hall on Tuesday. We're walking at Schiller Woods at the Northwest Portage Park Walking Museum. Really cool. We're doing a land acknowledgement with the American Indian Center. It's going to be pretty awesome. And it's the second one. It's my first one, but it's the second one that Cook County's had.
Well, thank you so much, Denise Pareto, for all of your good work, your amazing amount of good work. And thanks for coming and joining us on Live from the Heartland. Even though we're not live and we're not at the Heartland, we appreciate
in the Heartland. We are
yes, there you go. Thank you for the conversation, Denise. And shine on.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure. Y'all have a great one.
Right on, sister.
Thank you. So I got to see something in the news recently that I've been picturing my entire lifetime almost in Rogers Park, and that is the solar water taxis or ferries taking people across lakes in India. That was the article I was reading. But I have been picturing it for Rogers Park to have a ferry that takes people walking onto it, having parked their bikes in a bike park lot, to get on a ferry that goes down the lake to the loop, drops them off at work. They come and get it at the end of the day. No cars at either entry or exit point, except
bicycles.
taxis. I mean, really, don't you think we should do this? Anyway, solar powered taxis in India, they're doing it. Why can't we? That was one of my things.
You know, one of the the books that influenced the three of us who are your co-hosts of this show is Michael Harrington's The Other America. And it came out in '62, and he talked about poverty in Appalachia and beyond. And it really moved a lot of us, and including people in government, Sergeant Shriver to help start the war on poverty, VISTA, those kind of programs. A report came out in the New York Times yesterday that was pretty concerning. Talked about 1 in 8 people in this country are going to bed without enough to eat, that there is a lot of hunger. And I've noticed in my driving around, which is a great pleasure these days, I went by a church over on Wilson near Ravenswood, and I saw long lines of people in line waiting for food. In our own neighborhood, right here in Rogers Park, at the United Church of Rogers Park, I think it's on Thursday mornings, there are Tuesday, I'm sorry. There are long lines going down Morse Avenue from the church, down Ashland, all the way to Pratt. And these are people of all backgrounds, races, nationalities, etc., standing in line with their bags, waiting to get something to eat.
Yeah, it's not the only place in the neighborhood that is I'm sorry, Michael.
I was just going to say it's real serious, and it's not going away.
True that. And we are so grateful that the good folks at Just Harvest,
what are we after?
Harvest, and Smack Dab, and Food Not Bombs, and the Glenwood Sunday Market are making this a neighborhood that does feed people, that is aware of it. And I know that there are many other groups around the city that are kind of stepping up and filling in the blanks. This community-led mutual support system, including the Rogers Park Community Response Team, which could use some drivers and assemblers if anybody out there has time and wherewithal. You're right, Michael. It's incredible. And every time I open up the refrigerator, I go, why is a person who is just one person in a home by herself have so much food and so many others do not?
But I do want to thank you for sharing your brownies with me yesterday, because you didn't want to eat them yourself.
It was one brownie.
It was really good.
Cut it in half. All right. Get us off of this, Tom.
Well, our hats are off to not only folks in Rogers Park, but around the city who really have stepped up. Food pantries are doing more than ever before. People who didn't do food before are now doing it. But groups that have been there for a long time, like Food Without Bombs, continue to find surplus food and make sure that people who need it get it. And it's just a phenomenal operation. Just Harvest has started a new, like United Church of Christ on Tuesdays. On Thursdays, you can go by there and get food. On a sliding scale basis, it's like a mini farmers market they just started up, and they'll do that through the fall as long as the weather allows us to do it. So anyway, we appreciate all the local efforts to make sure that people are fed, and to make sure that the 40% of food that's wasted in this country stops being wasted and gets reprocessed into households that really need it. We've had our own duck husbandry going on in our backyard. We actually have succeeded in creating some new ducklings this summer. Ironically, some of them are done with the chickens that are next door with our neighbors. One of them started brooding. We put some of our fertilized eggs underneath her. Voila! 28 days later, 3 more ducklings. It's amazing how this stuff happens. But that circle of life stuff going on in our backyard and other backyards, it's so meaningful now when we're cooped up at home, a lot closer to home. I feel so fortunate to have the space in the yard and to be able to share it, particularly with ever more monarchs. Our milkweed was incredible this year. It's really been, I think, as we're all home, we're paying more attention to those bird sounds and insects, and boy, the cicadas are really going at it right now. So get out there as you walk around, notice those little things. It's one way that we can make our lives a little happier and better as we struggle through the challenges we face.
And now for the sports report, back page of this paper. Biggest deal, I think, right now is that the NBA and the WNBA, that would be the National Basketball Association and the Women's Basketball Association, continue to lead the pro leagues in players speaking out and taking a stand. But it is happening everywhere. Bears, you know, for Bear fans, we're waiting to see who the quarterback will be and if the games actually come off. It looks like it. And baseball continues. Both the Sox and the Cubs are flirting or are in first place at this time. We will keep you posted. I searched for information on Colin Kaepernick. While a couple of teams are showing interest, nothing is really happening. And while the NFL is coming out with all this stuff around Black Lives Matters and equality, none of these teams are stepping up to take a really qualified quarterback. With that said, we'll be watching the games or at least following what happened. I want to share with you a little information about seeing this show and encouraging others to look at it. You can listen to a rebroadcast at our regular slot at 9 o'clock Central Time on WLUW 88.7 or WLUW.org anywhere in the world. And you can look at it anytime now on youtube.com/Heartland Media. There are hundreds of shows, including the current number 20 will be up there very shortly.
I'm going to give thanks to Susan Clark for post-production. Thank you, Susan, so much. And for WLUW for getting Heartland at Home on the air in our old normal time slot, 9 a.m. on Saturdays. So to the other great members of our team who are doing their own thing at this point, we still love you and miss you, Lynn Orman and James Porter. We'll be back together, I'm sure, doing our show together again. And we're looking for fall interns to assist in post-production and marketing. So if you are an intern, if you are a Loyola student or any student from anywhere, and you want to help Live from the Heartland
too.
at home, contact Michael via fatback@aol.com or the station manager at WLUW.